Yeah, I said in the annual report that I thought it was very likely that the reinsurance business would not be as good in the next 10 years as it has been in the last 10 years. I may be wrong on that, but that's just a judgment based on seeing the competitive dynamics of the reinsurance business now versus 10 or 20 years ago. Both Munich, we sold our entire holdings, which were substantial, of Munich Re and Swiss Re. We owned about 3% of Swiss Re, and we owned more than 10% of Munich Re. And last year, we sold those two holdings. They're fine companies. They're well-managed companies. I like the people that run them. I think their business, the business of the reinsurance companies generally, is less attractive for the next 10 years than it has been for the last 10 years. In part, that's because what's happened to interest rates. A significant portion of what you earn in insurance comes from investment of the float, and both of those companies, and for that matter almost all of the reinsurance industry, is somewhat more restricted in what they can do with their float because they don't have this huge capital cushion that Berkshire has, and also because they don't have this great amount of unrelated earning power that Berkshire has. Berkshire has more leeway in what it can do simply because it does have capital that's many times what its competitors have, and it also has earning power coming from a whole variety of unrelated areas, unrelated to insurance. So it was not a negative judgment in any way on those two companies. It was not a negative judgment on their managements, but it was at least a mildly negative judgment on the reinsurance business. Now, we have the ability at Berkshire to actually rearrange to a degree. We are certainly affected by industry factors, but we have more flexibility in modifying business models, and we've operated that way over the years in insurance generally and in particularly in reinsurance. So a Munich, a Swiss, all the major reinsurance companies except for us is pretty well tied to a given type of business model. They don't really have as many options in terms of where capital gets deployed or something. They have to continue down the present path, and I think they'll do fine. But I don't think they will do as fine in the next 10 years as they have in the last 10. And I don't think if we played the same game as we were playing the last 10, we would do as well. But we do have considerably more flexibility in terms of how we conduct all of our insurance operations, but particularly in reinsurance. We have an extra string to our bow that the rest of the industry doesn't have. The amount of capital that's come in to the reinsurance business, it is no fun running a traditional reinsurance company and having money come in, particularly if you're in Europe, and have money come in and look around you for investment choices and find out that a great many of the things that you were buying a few years ago now have negative yields. The whole idea of float is that it's supposed to be invested at a positive rate, and a fairly substantial positive rate. And that game has been over for a while, and it looks like it'll be at least unattractive, if not terrible, for a considerable period in the future. Charlie?
Yeah, there's a lot of new capacity in reinsurance, and there's a lot of very heavy competition. A lot of people from finance have come over into reinsurance, and all the old competitors remain too. That's different from precision cast parts, where most of the customers would be totally crazy to hire some other supplier because precision cast parts is so much more reliable and so much better. Of course, we like the place with more competitive advantage. We're learning.
The to put it in terms of economics 101, and that basically in reinsurance, supply has gone up and demand has not gone up. And some of the supply is driven by investment managers who would like to establish something offshore where they don't have to pay taxes. And reinsurance is sort of the easiest beard, what you might call beard, behind which to actually engage in money management in a friendly tax jurisdiction. And you can set up a reinsurance operation with very few people by taking large chunks of what brokers may offer. It's not the greatest reinsurance in the world, and a couple of the operations that have done that have proven that statement to be right. But nevertheless, it is a very, very easy way to have a disguised investment operation in a friendly tax jurisdiction. But that becomes supply in the reinsurance field, and supply has gone up relative to demand, and it looks to me like that will continue to be the case. And couple that with the poor returns on float, and it's not as good a business as it was. Now we'll talk to an insurance man about it. Cliff Gallen.
Thank you. In terms of growth and profitability, GEICO really got whooped by Progressive Direct over the last year. In 2015, Progressive Direct's auto business grew policy count by 9.1%, GEICO only 5.4%. And in terms of profitability, the combined ratio at Progressive was a 95.1 and GEICO's was a 98.0. Is this evidence that Progressive's investments in technology like Snapshot, investments that GEICO has spurned, is it making a difference in a time of difficult loss trends? Why is GEICO suddenly losing to Progressive Direct?
Yeah, well, I would say this, over the last, well, I forget what year it was we passed Progressive and what year it was we passed Allstate, but GEICO's growth rate in the first quarter was not as high as in the past couple of first quarters, but it was quite satisfactory. Now, the first quarter is by far the best quarter for growth. But last year, both frequency, how often people had accidents, and severity, which is the cost per accident, in other words, just how much those accidents cost you, both of those went up quite suddenly and substantially. And Progressive's figure showed that they were hit by that less than Allstate and GEICO and some others. But I don't think you'll see necessarily those same trends this year. It's an interesting thing. Last year, for the first time in I don't know how many years, the number of deaths in auto accidents per 100 million miles went up. Now, if you go back to the mid-1930s, there were almost 15 people killed per 100 million miles driven. It got down to just slightly over 1, from 15 to 1. You had roughly as many people killed in auto accidents in the mid-1930s, about 33,000 a year, as we had last year, or the year before, when people drove almost 15 times as many miles. Cars have gotten far, 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 far safer. And it's a good thing, because if we'd had the same rate of deaths from auto accidents as we had in the 30s relative to miles driven, we would have had over 500,000 people die last year from auto accidents instead of a figure closer to 40,000. But last year, for the first time, there was more driving, and I think there was more distracted driving. So you really had this uptick in frequency and more important, in severity. GEICO has adjusted its rates. As I mentioned, my own prediction would be that the underwriting margins at GEICO will be better this year than last year, although you never know when catastrophes are coming along. March and April have had a lot of cat activity. I made a bet a long time ago on a mental one on the Geico model versus the Progressive model, and as I say, they were significantly ahead of us in volume a few years back, and we passed them, and we passed Allstate, and as I put in the annual report, I hope on my 100th birthday that the Geico people announced to me that they passed State Farm, but I have to do my share on that too by getting to 100, so we'll see what happens on that particular one. Charlie?
Well, I don't think it's a tragedy that some competitor got a little better ratio from one period. Geico's quadrupled its market share since we bought all of it.
Quintupled, yeah.
Quintupled, all right. I don't think we should worry about the fact that somebody else had a good quarter.
Yeah. I think it's far more sure that Geico will pass State Farm someday than that I'll make it to 100, I'll put it that way. Okay, we'll go to the shareholder from Station 2.
Greetings to all of you from the Midwest of Europe. I'm Norman Rentrop from Bonn, Germany, a shareholder since 1992. My question is about the future of salesmanship in our companies. Warren, you have always demonstrated a heart for direct selling. When we met you in the midst of a tornado warning in the barber shop, you immediately offered to write insurance for us.
That's true.
Now,
they were all huddled down there in the barber shop, and there wasn't going to be any tornado, so I told them if they give me $1, they can go upstairs, and if anything happened to them, I'd pay them, I forget, $1 million or something of the sort.
Now, we see with the rise of Amazon.com and others a shift from push marketing to pull marketing, from millions of catalogs having been sent out in the past to now consumers searching on what they are looking for. What is your take on how this shift from push to pull marketing will affect our companies?
Well, Norman, the development you refer to is huge. I mean, really huge. And it isn't just Amazon, but Amazon is a huge part of it. And what they've accomplished in a fairly short period of time and continue to accomplish is remarkable. The number of satisfied customers they've developed, and we don't make any decision involving even the manufacturing of goods, the retailing, whatever it is, without thinking long and hard about what the world will look like in 5 or 10 or 20 years with that powerful trend, really hugely powerful trend that you just described. So we don't look at that as something where we're going to try and beat them at their own game. You know, they're better than we are at that. And so Charlie and I are not going to out Bezos by a long shot. But we are going to think about that. It does not worry us, obviously, with the precision cast. But it doesn't worry us in terms of the overwhelming majority of our businesses. But it is a huge economic trend that 20 years ago was not on anybody's radar screen, and lately has been on everybody's radar screen, and many of them have not, and including us in a few areas, have not figured the way to either participate in it or to counter it. The Geico is a good example of a company that in an industry that had to adjust to change, and some people made the change better than others. We were slow on the internet. The phone had worked so well for us, and this traditional advertising and the phone had worked so well that there's always a resistance to think about new possibilities. When we saw what was happening on the internet, we jumped in with both feet, and with mobile and whatever. But there are the nature of capitalism is somebody's always trying to figure. If you've got a good business, they're always trying to figure out how to take it away from you and improve on it. And the effect, I would say, just of Amazon, but others that are playing the same game, the effect on industry, the full effect is far from having been seen. I mean, it is a big force, and it already has disrupted plenty of people, and it will disrupt more. I think Berkshire is quite well situated. For one thing, one big advantage we have is we didn't ever see ourselves as starting out in one industry. I mean, we went into department stores, but we didn't think of ourselves as department store guys, or we didn't think of ourselves as steel guys or tire guys or anything of that sort. So we've thought of ourselves as having capital to allocate. If you start with a given industry focus and you spend your whole time working on a way to make a better tire or whatever it may be, I think it's hard to have the flexibility of mind that you have if you just think you have a hopefully large and growing pile of capital, and trying to figure out what is the best next move that you can make with that capital. And I think we do have a real advantage that way. But I think Amazon's got a real advantage too, in this intense focus on having hundreds of millions of generally very happy customers getting very quick delivery of something that they want to get promptly, and they want to shop the way they shop. And if I owned a bunch of shopping malls or something like that, I would be thinking plenty hard about what they might look like 10 or 20 years from now. Charlie?
Well, I would say that we failed so thoroughly in retailing when we were young that we pretty well avoided the worst troubles when we were old. I think net Berkshire has been helped by the internet. The help at GEICO has been enormous, and it's contributed greatly to the huge increase in market share. And our biggest retailers are so strong that they'll be among the last people to have troubles from Amazon.
I didn't get that dollar from you, Norman, actually, after I gave you that wonderful advice. Andrew?
Thank you, Warren. Great to see you today. Got a lot of questions on this particular topic, and this question is a particularly pointed one. Warren, for the last several years at this meeting, you've been asked about the negative health effects of Coca-Cola products, and you've done a masterful job dodging the question by telling us how much Coke you drink personally. Statistically, you may be the exception. According to a peer-reviewed study by Tufts University, soda and sugary drinks may lead to 184,000 deaths among adults every year. The study found that sugar-sweetened beverages contributed to 133,000 deaths from diabetes, 45,000 deaths from cardiovascular disease, 6,450 deaths from cancer. Another shareholder wrote in about Coke, noted that you declined to invest in the cigarette business on ethical grounds, despite once saying, quote, "It was a perfect business because it costs a penny to make, sell it for $1, it's addictive, and there's fantastic brand loyalty." Again, removing your own beverage consumption from the equation. Please explain directly why we Berkshire Hathaway shareholders should be proud to own Coke.
Yeah, I think people confuse the amount of calories consumed. I mean, I happen to elect to consume about 700 calories a day from Coca-Cola. So I'm about 1/4 Coca-Cola, roughly. Not sure which quarter, and I'm not sure we want to pursue the question. But I think if you decide that sugar generally is something that the human race shouldn't have, I think the average person consumes something like 150 pounds of dry weight sugar a year, 125 pounds. I mean, what's in Coca-Cola largely, where the calories come from, is sugar. I elect to get my 2,600 or 2,700 calories a day from things that make me feel good when I eat them. And that's been my sole test. It wasn't a test that my mother necessarily thought was great, or my grandfather, but there are over 1.9 billion 8-ounce servings of some Coca-Cola drink. Now, they have an enormous range of products, I mean, they have a few that are called Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, and that sort of thing. But they have literally thousands of products. 1.9 billion, that's, what is that, that's 693 billion, 500 million 8-ounce servings a year, except it's a leap year. That's almost 100 8-ounce servings per capita for 7 billion people in the world every year. And that's been going on since 1886. And I would find quite spurious the fact that somebody says if you're eating 3,500 or so calories a day and you're consuming 2,700 or 800, and some of the 3,500 is Coca-Cola, to lay it any particular obesity related illnesses on the Coca-Cola you drink. You have the choice of consuming more than you use. I mean, and I make a choice to eat or to get 700 calories from this. I like fudge a lot, peanut brittle, and I am a very, very, very happy guy. And I don't know, I think, and I'm serious about this, I think if you were happy every day, it may be hard to measure, but I think you're going to live longer as well. So there may be a compensating factor. I really wish I'd had a twin, and that twin had eaten broccoli his entire life, and we both consumed the same number of calories. I know I would have been happier, and I think the odds are fairly good I would have lived longer. I think Coca-Cola is a marvelous product. I mean, if you consume 3,500 or 4,000 calories a day and live a normal life in terms of your metabolism, something's going to go wrong with your body at some point. But if you balance out the calories so that you don't become obese, I have not seen evidence that convinces me that I'll make it. It'll be more likely I reach 100 if I suddenly switch to water and broccoli. Incidentally, a friend of mine, R.J. Miller, a remarkable man, born about 100 miles from here west, 8th child, near Shelby, Nebraska. He said Shelby's population was 596 and it never changed because every time some girl had a baby, a guy had to leave town. It was very stable. But R.J. went on to be president of Ford Motor Company from this farm near Shelby, and he had his 100th birthday on March 4th of this year. So I went out to see R.J. for his birthday on March 4th, and R.J. told me that there were 10,000 men in the United States that had lived to be 100 or greater, and there were 45,000 women that were 100 or greater. So I came back and I checked that on the internet. I went to the census figures, and sure enough, that is the ratio. There's 10,000 men over 100 roughly and 45,000 women. So if you really want to improve your longevity prospects. I mean, a guy in my position, you have a sex change. I mean, you're 4.5 times more likely to get to be 100. That sounds like one of those studies that people put out. It's just a matter of fact, folks. I think I'll have Charlie go first, though, on that one. Charlie, do you have any comments?
Well,
have some fun.
I like the peanut brittle better than the Coke, but I drink a lot of Diet Coke, and I think the people who ask questions like that one always make one ghastly error that's really inexcusable. They measure the detriment without considering the advantage. Well, that's really stupid. That's like saying we should give up air travel through airlines because 100 people die a year in air crashes or something. That would be crazy. The benefit is worth the risk. And if every person has to have about 8 or 10 glasses of water every day to stay alive, and it's pretty cheap and sensible and improves life to add a little extra flavor to your water and a little stimulation and a little calories if you want to eat that way, there are huge benefits to humanity in that, and it's worth having some disadvantage. We ought to have almost a law in the editorial, I'm sounding like Donald Trump, where these people shouldn't be allowed to cite the defects without citing the offsetting advantage. It's immature and stupid.
Okay, Greg Warren.
Warren, with both coal-fired and natural gas plants continuing to generate around 2/3 of the nation's electricity and renewables accounting for less than 10%, there remains plenty of room for growth. At this point, Berkshire Energy, which has invested heavily in the segment, is one of the nation's largest producers of both wind and solar power, and yet still only generates around 1/3 of its overall capacity from renewables. As you noted earlier, Mid-American recently committed another $3.6 billion to wind production, which should lift the amount of electricity it generates from wind to 85% by 2020. You've also had the company overall pledging to have around $30 billion in renewables longer term. The recent renewal of both the wind and solar energy tax credits has made this kind of investment more economically viable and should clear the path for future investments. Eliminating